Hello, welcome to GC's Book Club, episode 7, although kind of episode 8 really, but whatever, too late now. Episode 7, Franny and Zooey by J.D. Salinger. How are we all doing? Don't have an intro for this one. I would have done, but there isn't really that much out there about this book. And neither will there be different covers being shown. Before I get onto the read, actually, I would say that Salinger has been done a bit dirty when it comes to book covers. I don't know whether that's because of his own requests or demands, maybe. But yeah, most of the covers that... I mean, it's not like there's a shit ton of books out there with his name attached, but they're all pretty boring, which is a shame, I guess. I don't know, just find it strange, especially when, you know, The Tenant was, I think, to Paul's only, you know, real known work, and that had, I featured like 7 or 8. But there was a lot more, so it's a mystery. That is, it's a mystery. Anyway, Franny and Zooey. It's an interesting little book. I'll give it that. It's a very interesting one. Obviously, as I'm talking about Salinger, I can't not mention The Catcher in the Rye. But it was published officially 10 years after the publication of his most famous book. But the story of Franny and the separate novella, I should say, of Zooey were published in 55 and 57, so it took another 4 years before they were put together as a single book. And it's quite odd for a number of reasons. First and foremost, I suppose that the beginning story that details Franny, who is our female protagonist, and the youngest sibling of the Glass family, is a short story, really. I mean, it might be a novelette. I'm not sure quite on the length of it. But yeah, overall, it had that short story kind of feel. And the story after that, which is more to do with Zooey, but that's back at their apartment and with the mothers involved. And she's concerned about Franny because at the end of the first short story, Franny has a kind of mental blip. She faints essentially, but it's all probably brought about through a kind of hyper consciousness, which did remind me quite a bit of Notes from Underground. Actually, I was getting that kind of vibe from her quite a bit, where it seemed like she was very internalized and therefore kind of spiraling around in her own viewpoint of the world and becoming, ironically, as narcissistic as the people she was being very critical of. But I do feel like everyone reaches these kind of existential moments, and really once you get further into the story, you kind of realize why that is the case. And the other kind of, it's not really an oddity, but it is a linkage that I didn't actually anticipate, and that there is another short story by Salinger in his collection of 9 stories called A Perfect Day for Banana Fish. I've waffled on about this here and there over the years, and it is one of my favourite short stories. and that does involve one of the Glass family members who actually, I mean, if you've now read, Franny and Zooey, then you know that one of their siblings, Seymour, committed suicide, and yeah, Banana Fish kind of details that. If you've never read it, I won't go into any spoilers to do with it, but well, maybe aside from that one. And yeah, it's one of those things I kept thinking, like, when I was reading it, I was like, is my enjoyment of this particular book enhanced because of that knowledge, or does it matter, kind of thing? I would probably say that it doesn't matter too much overall, mainly because it still, stands on its own legs, and because we learn about the family history of the Glass family, we're already aware that this must have affected them in a myriad of different ways. And really, that's kind of what is at the core of the novel, I would say, overall. I mean, Franny's despair is somewhat similar to Holden Caulfield's, I suppose. I mean, you could argue that his crisis kind of happens a bit sooner, but again, in Catcher, he is dealing with the death of his brother, and so there is a kind of mirror going on there, one could argue, I suppose. But I also found that Franny's kind of character was a little bit similar, where she does say things about, people being fakes and phonies and everyone doing stuff for ego and ego alone. But she is definitely her own character. I wouldn't say she's quite a female Holden, but to any of the reviewers I've seen on YouTube who attack Catcher, and especially Holden, I would advise them to read Franny and Zooey just to see the kind of female equivalent of his character, because she is very much of his ilk. That might be because of the time it was in, or the era perhaps, or the class that they're in, because that's quite evident from the beginning. But yeah, so to get into the plot, which is minimal, I would argue, that's fine by me, but it's going to be quite a basic thing to explain, because it is quite literally... Am I even fucking on? It's, who's in the house? Hello. But yeah, so we start off with the first story, which is the short story, and it's about Franny's boyfriend is coming to... Oh no, Franny is the one coming to visit. And yeah, they're just to meet up. There's a big football game going on, so they're kind of mildly... Well, there's a lot of hustling and bustling surrounding this. And so Franny is due to arrive by platform on the train. So this is where Lane, her boyfriend, is waiting. And we kind of get an introduction to her from the off, because he's carrying a letter that she wrote him that he reads whilst waiting. And it's a good way to kind of introduce her character and kind of build some sort of mythos around her before we get to actually experience what she's like. Mainly because it does demonstrate a kind of frantic mindset. I think even in the letter she wrote, it says something about saying, it's Tuesday, I think. And then she just kind of writes down almost like a stream of consciousness kind of thing. So that kind of makes you wonder, like, is this because she's got that type of quirky personality, or is it indicative of something else? Thankfully, it is the latter. But yeah, when she meets Lane, they go off and for, I think, gins or some sort of drink. She's constantly chain smoking. They're supposed to be having something to eat. And she just kind of finds everything he's doing and everyone else to be quite irritating. And she kind of starts rambling on about this, and she's nitpicky and stuff like that. I didn't find her to be too bad, but she seems so self-conscious of it that you're not quite sure, where she ends and begins kind of thing, because she's almost being critical of herself when she's being critical, and then but she can't help being critical of others type of thing. So you get this sense that this might be because of her youth, or it might be because something is amiss, mentally speaking. She is carrying a book, and we do get a kind of signal about the importance of this book, mainly when she tries to conceal it from her boyfriend's view. She seems especially dismissive of it when he inquires as to what it is. But eventually it does come about after she's taken several bathroom breaks to kind of get to grips with herself again. And it turns out to be this book called The Pilgrim, which is about a Russian peasant who is essentially on a path of enlightenment through the use of a certain prayer. And this prayer reportedly has cropped up numerous times throughout human history in a lot of different belief systems, from Buddhism to Hinduism, wherever and whenever kind of thing. And it seems as if she's taken this book very much to heart and is possibly having some sort of religious conversion, perhaps. I mean, I think she's Catholic, or the Glass family is Catholic, but there's obviously some sort of crisis going on within her. And her boyfriend seems, I mean, he's not really a focal point of a character in it. But yeah, he's caring and whatnot, but he doesn't really know how to deal with Franny. She's of a high intellect, which we do get to learn a bit more about later. But yeah, it's just quite a neat short story, good introduction to it. I could have actually read more of that, mainly because I thought Salinger's kind of dive into, and apparently it is quite a lot about Salinger's own kind of journey with religious thinking and whatnot. But I believe it is in that story in particular where Franny's complaining at one point, which she is wont to do, about how no one is focused on why people accumulate knowledge. Like, what's the use of doing it? And it's all about wisdom, which is actually, I thought, quite a good point and something that doesn't really come up too often for some reason. But yeah, just that general idea of like, why are we learning all this much? What's the use of it? Are we just doing it for the sake of it? Are we doing it to try and impress others? Are we doing it just to test ourselves, or is it actually because we want to have a more refined view of the world and to be able to maybe, dish knowledge in future, knowing that through experience and yada yada yada? But it's just these little things aren't really mentioned. I can't quite remember whether that's in the first section or the second, but considering the two are companion pieces, I suppose it doesn't really matter. But yeah, by the end of the story, she kind of collapses. Basically, she goes off to the bathroom at one point, and during a kind of prayer to herself, I think, or she's always kind of mouthing this thing, so it's almost like she's whispering, because the idea is that once you find the way of performing this particular prayer, you will eventually reach a state of enlightenment where your very breathing will be a constant form of this salutation, let's say, to God and whatnot. So it's quite a fascinating way to introduce something. I mean, I suppose it does put up a couple of red flags as to like, where is this going to go? And then, yeah, we get the second half and we're introduced to Zooey, who it's Zachary. This might be some sort of Americanism or something. It's not too familiar to me. And he's in a bath. He's reading through a script because he's an actor. And he's also reads through a letter from Buddy, which is another brother of theirs who isn't dead, but he's gone AWOL. And the mother is there kind of complaining about the fact that he promises to get a phone, but he never does. And it seems, it's intentional that he's not getting a phone because he doesn't want his family to contact him and all of this kind of stuff. And I think he's become a monk as well. So he's essentially absolved himself of family or familial responsibility. And so Zooey reading through this is probably another somewhat foreshadowing of what the kind of core of the book is all about. And obviously the mother is very concerned about Franny because she's now returned home. She's basically, all she does is sleep and cry. She doesn't ever eat. There's this whole thing about chicken broth that she keeps refusing. And it seems like she's still in a state of mental breakdown. Some might argue depression. I would actually be, more inclined to think she has suffered some sort of, depressive bout, but quite a severe one. And as it goes on, it's a little bit predictable, I would say, because you kind of realise that, the older brother's going to likely trying to intervene and, give a kind of intervention of sorts, or at least try to make her see straight, or at least, find out what the hell's going on with her, basically. And then as it goes on, we realise that the suicide of their brother is essentially what is causing the problem that they have. I mean, there are other elements, which I'll get into, hopefully. But it is more about how they're trying to deal with this, even though it was quite a while back, in fairness, I suppose. But it's definitely put a cloud over their existence. And the book itself, The Pilgrim, was found in Seymour's old room and had been there for years, and that's a kind of like symbol of like, and apparently he was quite obsessed with it as well at one point, and Franny's new obsession with it is a concern because obviously of how his life ended, so it seems like she might be on the same trajectory. But they were also, all the family kids were part of this game show that existed called The Wise Child, or It's a Wise Child. And so they were basically on this contestant show for years. And that was all about, likely trivial or trivia knowledge kind of thing. But in a weird way, as Zooey says at one point, it's kind of made them freaks because they have this kind of education, obviously to do with this game show that they were on for years, but at the same time that's kind of separated them in a similar way, I suppose, that Fame would do, because obviously they were somewhat known because of this particular show, but also how they were kind of exposed to these concepts and ideas that are rather highbrow, let's say, and that has essentially ostracized them. And to put a suicide of the family on top of that, as well as a disappearance of sorts from another brother, and it fits that Buddy is a monk, because that also kind of, it seems like with all the knowledge that they have as young as they are, it seems like where do people go? And I suppose I could look at James Bergman here, but the religious kind of thing, you'd think it would be the opposite, but I think it seems interesting to me that it seems the more people grow in their learning, the more likely they are to veer towards some sort of religion at some point. I don't really get that. I don't know whether that's what the book's saying, but they definitely felt like there was a shade of that going on, or at least like being explored. And I mean, if that sounds like your cup of tea, I mean, I'm sure you'd probably get into the novel. I mean, there were things about it that I really liked. There were things about it that irked me a bit. It's not a novel that is, be a weird expression to use, but it's not easy on the eye, in the term that there's a lot of dialogue, and a lot of the time the dialogue feels repetitive because the characters they're very well thought out and realised, I would say, but that leaves them to their annoying little human tendencies, where Zachary, for instance, is quite cocksure to the point of arrogance, and his mockery of his mother and stuff is often funny, but even at times it can get a little bit grating when it feels like, okay, he's doing that again and being pompous and brilliantly sarcastic. I was reminded of like, oh yeah, people used to talk to each other like this. It was kind of weird. It's like, I don't think this happens anymore. Maybe it still does in family units, but the level was just like really, really high up. Like he'd go on for like a whole paragraph just being completely facetious and deliberately like condescending and stuff like that. And it was often quite funny. But I don't think people really communicate in this fashion because, I don't know, the internet. I don't know where that or why that disappeared. It might have been a sign of the era where in this time intellectualism wasn't looked down on and it was actually aspired to. And for somebody to be able to communicate and express their ideas was something people admired, essentially. But yeah, in the same vein, it did get a little bit tedious at times. I mean, it's almost like Salinger knew it, because there was a couple of times when in the letters that are within the piece, there's almost like apologies for how for the length of it and for how it drags on, and whether there'll be grammatical mistakes and things like that. And it's I don't know whether that was him being conscious of it and trying to like say, I know this waffles on a bit, but I'm still going to fucking do it anyway. So here's the warning, at least. So here's my little disclaimer. So yeah, anyway. Zooey is in the bath. He's been in there for ages. He's self-indulgent. He chain smokes. He's having a bit of a biff with his old dear, who he calls Bess. Like, for some reason, the middle upper classes always seem to call their mothers and fathers by their Christian names, which I don't really understand. Is that a thing? I've only ever seen this when it comes to people who are a bit well-to-do. They call, oh, Richard, why are you know, and it's a bit like, why are you calling your mum by her first name? I don't really get that, but it seems to be almost like of their status kind of thing. But whatever. Bit pretentious, basically, which is what the Glass family are. And there were criticisms of the novel for that reason, because they do seem a little bit self-satisfied and whatnot. But I didn't really get too much of that. I mean, yeah, they might be a tad indulgent of themselves, but at the same time, at least they're inquisitous, you know, and stuff like that. Like they have a deep passion for the things that they do, and therefore any breakdown or depressive mode is going to be just as theatrical, let's say. And given their own past, I kind of felt like that was fine. Like, I didn't mind it. I thought, really, the characters were very well, realised, as I said before. Like, it was visceral at times. It was weird. I remember one moment when the mum and son are talking. For some reason, it just hit me emotionally. And I don't really know why. Like, I can't pinpoint what it was, whether it was because they were alluding to the fact that they were talking about their deceased, you know, brother and son in the mother's case. But there was something that just hit really well, I thought. And maybe it was because they were talking about, you know, the worries about Franny's mental condition, but also just life in general, and of what's happened in the past, how the way they communicate with one another creates these issues. And these are all things that are there, but no one ever says it outright. And you can kind of feel like a lot of the issue is to do with this suicide, and yet what can any of them really do? Because they can't communicate with the person who killed themselves, obviously. So it's kind of just left this unanswerable void in a lot of their hearts. And that part of it got me. I felt it quite a lot. I felt that more between mother and son than I probably did with Franny and Zooey, although it was still there a bit. I just found it a bit more predictable as it went on. And I suppose my main criticism was that it felt like it added a little bit more than it needed right at the end. There was some bit where he walks into the old bedroom and he sees a lot of passages on the wall written by famous authors and poets and whatnot, and he kind of recites them. It's fine. It just felt a little bit... I didn't think it was that necessary overall. Like, it was okay. And it has a nice bit where it kind of rounds it off, where... It was so obvious, though. I mean, he basically goes off into the room, and then the phone goes off. Franny comes out to answer, and it's Buddy, the brother who never rings, and it's pretty obvious that it isn't Buddy, it's Zooey. But when she clocks it pretty quickly anyway, it's kind of fine. And it was kind of, I like the symbolism of the fact that even though they were in the same apartment, they were still at a distance or communicating for almost as if from the other side, that type of thing. And it just had a nice kind of, it rounded it off in a way that was kind of like the opposite of Banana Fish, where we get tragedy in that piece, and in this one there's kind of a ray of hope with it, because it seems like, yeah, okay, things aren't the best that they can be, but we live to fight another day, type of thing, or at least look ahead to the future. So it was actually like that finishes with light, whereas Banana Fish finishes with the dark overall. Anything else before I start chatting with you lot? I was bored. Really disliked the Noel Coward histrionic stage play conversations. Call all your mummy free. It's funny you said that, because I mean, the final point I'd probably make in regard to how it's written is it is like a play. I was a little bit confused by that at times, because envisioning it, I was like, well, this should probably be on the stage, shouldn't it? Because you've got the opening scene, okay, yeah, it's with a train, but you could do that on stage easy enough. You're only at a platform, then you're in a bar, then later you're in a bathroom, and then you're in a living room and another couple of rooms. That could easily be done on stage. Maybe when they were talking about the Pilgrim book, you could easily imagine some sort of desert or whatever of some wanderer kind of going around trying to find nirvana and all that type of thing. And yeah, and mainly because there's just so much fucking dialogue in it, which is the strength and the weakness of the piece, I would say, overall. I mean, I felt like the dialogue, it was giving you exposition, but when the dialogue is like the main way of telling the story, I mean, that's kind of fine to me. But yeah, just a bit perplexing, because I was imagining the mum and son bit properly on the stage. Same with pretty much every scene in it overall, but there's some of them it really did feel like, well, it's kind of ironic that he's an actor, because this would be, yeah, relished to be performed on stage, and it wouldn't even take much adaptation, really. You could take what's written and roll with that, because most of the communication and the subtle little intricacies of their characters are within the dialogue and within the descriptions of their facial gesticulations and expressions and whatnot. And yeah, their characters really kind of shine through in that regard. I didn't find it too tedious. I did like, it is grating at times. But I think it's more to do with the somewhat pomposity of their characters a little bit. So I was forgiving of that, and I suppose at the same time, like if I was to, I mean, it's not Catcher. I'm sorry. Like I think there was an article from last week claiming it was better, and nah. You're having a laugh if you think it's. I mean, I still think it's good, and it's got its own thing going on, and I quite like the kind of just the oddity of it, really, to have a short story and then a novella that kind of blend together. How often do you see that? I mean, it's not something you come across frequently. I mean, I suppose my main, if I was, say, the editor or publisher for this, I would be like, why? I mean, I get why you're calling it Franny and Zooey, but there's a lot of themes in here, especially when it comes to the human condition. I think you've got to tie it in with something a bit bit more poignant, you know. Franny is fine, I guess, but the Zooey thing, it just kind of, all it really details is, okay, there are a couple of middle to upper class types who love the sound of their own voices, and that could all be fine. It's just, I feel like the novel was getting at something a bit deeper than that. I was also somewhat surprised by the theatre talk and whatnot, mainly because, yeah, the fact that Holden Caulfield is very anti the movies and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, to go back to the character of Franny, I suppose the other criticisms I read, which I don't actually agree with, were saying how the character you meet in the first story, or the girl at least, is a different girl in the next one. And I was like, I can kind of see where they're coming from, but at the same time the scenario is totally different. So for one thing, Franny is essentially free from the familial expectation during the opening kind of story. You know, she's on her own, she's travelled on her own, she's going to see her boyfriend. She's going to be a bit more expressive, a bit more confident in some ways of herself. And then later on, after she's had a mental breakdown, essentially, of course she's going to be different, because not only is she the youngest of this Glass family, but she's a girl as well. And she's got an older brother during a time that I would say was more patriarchal, and at least like the man of the house and all of that kind of stuff. Like she would naturally be invited to be a little girl in a lot of circumstances. And especially when she is actually vulnerable, it's not that surprising to me that she was a bit more meek than she was in the first one, when she was essentially displaying signs of being a manic depressive. Some also may lay claim that she was pregnant, and that was potentially the reason for her hormonal whatever. I mean, I had the brief thought of that, but I didn't really focus on it. I didn't, it didn't seem relevant to me, really. So I found that kind of curious more than anything else. I was just like, I don't really know why they have to kind of throw that in there. I mean, I suppose it still could have been a possibility, but it wasn't the point the story was trying to get to, which was probably a difficult one to pinpoint in a lot of ways, mainly because it explores a lot of things. I mean, it's kind of about not a crisis of faith, but a crisis possibly of belief in a lot of ways, or at least like a crossroads of what am I doing with my life, essentially, because Franny has dropped out of her theatre class and seems to be abandoning everything that makes her her. So you're wondering, like, what is, well, the novel's kind of getting at that, like this, and that is what is similar to Catcher in the Rye, I would argue. Franny's just doing it a number of years later, and in probably a less extreme kind of circumstance. She doesn't go, riding around New York City for 24 hours straight kind of thing. She's clearly been building up to it, which you get a lot of clues for in the letter that she sent to Lane. His character was probably the most boring, I would say. I mean, the others, I felt like you could picture them quite a lot. And the other thing, I suppose, getting onto like how people would speak to each other back then, there was something more charming, I would say, about that 1950s-esque era of America, where prosperity and the baby boom and the kind of, consumerism explosion and all this kind of stuff, it did have more room for hope, I would say. Or at least, like, the propaganda would make you believe that. But you could kind of feel it. Anytime you watch these kind of things, you're just like, that era just feels like there's something new is coming around, And yeah, there's something about the spirit of that time that I do quite enjoy. Um, None of that around anymore. So at the same time, I kind of find it a little bit depressing. It's like, oh yeah, people used to have vocabulary. That was nice. I enjoyed that, or I would have enjoyed that. It's like, yeah, it's almost like the opposite now. Um, it's a weird book overall. I just can't really pinpoint it that much. I mean, it's a little bit surprising to me that it came out 10 years after Catcher, mainly because this kind of feels like it would have come before. Maybe some of the short stories were being worked on at some other point. I mean, Salinger had quite a few that were never published, I believe. So, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I mean, you just. I thought the similarities to it weren't as, you know, obvious, but the more I'm talking about it, the more I'm realizing that actually, yeah, they're pretty similar. But I suppose I think every writer is guilty of this, and I do think by extension to yeah, get on that subject, like a lot of the same issues will come up. I mean, I think people are limited in general, and you're better off exploring the things that you're good at than trying to expand into territory that it's just not going to give you that fire, you know. And I obviously Salinger probably struggled with this his whole life. I think whatever happened to him in World War II stayed with him, and that is what comes out in his novels. Basically, it's a crisis of raison d'être constantly. Like a lot of his characters are just on the brink of madness, essentially. But the madness doesn't quite come around. You need to go to Poe for that, you know. So it's like playing to the strengths. It's like there's certain things, certain barriers you can get to, or you know, the limits are there basically. And I enjoyed Franny's character. I mean, I thought she was a bit annoying, but you know, she's a 20-year-old woman, so which ones of them aren't, you know? But and at the same time, I found Zooey to be up his own arse, but somewhat charming. Although after a while, you can kind of realize that it's all me, me, me. So the irony of the complaints, especially of Franny, is that she is a complete example of everything she's railing against. But I quite like the points that Zooey made to her by, you know, it's fine that you're critical of their ideas and even of their belief systems and whatnot, but when you criticize people's dress sense and things like that, that's just in the realm of the ad hominem. So it becomes a bit petty, basically, overall. And I thought, yeah, it was a good way of analysing that. It's probably basically Salinger having a conversation with himself for 200 pages. But, you know, writing is schizophrenia, after all. Yeah, I think every writer is, even the ones who seemingly, you know, branch out. Oh, I'll do sci-fi. Oh, I'll do horror. Oh, I'll do it. The core of your being is always there, kind of thing. And I think that's fine. You know, you need some sort of, yeah, root, as it were, which is ironic considering the subject matter of this book, because it seems like it's trying to move away from that. But in the Freudian versus Jungian sense, it's like, can you completely reshape your identity? I don't think you can. But I can see the desire to. And the, you know, maybe the taking on of the task is worthwhile. I don't know, but it seems like a, oh shit, 1 minute. I should be back in a second. It's just my Mac overheating, so I'll just let the fan do its work. Yeah. We back? But he mocks psychoanalysis, then 5 minutes later implies that we, society, don't talk about these traumas enough. So which is it? Well, I mean, it's a good point. I suppose from my vantage point, I would say Salinger is very critical of the commodification of these types of things, which is probably why religion comes up, at least in this book in particular. I have the same issue with it. It's like I enjoy psychology, but I still see it as a pseudoscience. So it's like, and it is a pseudoscience by every technical definition, but we all enjoy that kind of thing because no one's ever wrong. So it's a very convenient way to be like, oh yeah, well, you're like this because your father never hugged you after fucking embarrassing moments or whatever. Like there probably is truth to it. I do think, patterns and whatnot definitely exist, but people's reactions to things are, our brains are more complicated than the way the universe works. So, or at least by comparison, in terms of like everything that's going on inside your head all the fucking time. So to pin it on one thing, next thing, la la la, is child's play, essentially. But how we seem to come up with these ideas, and it's more that what happens. So you could have, psychology for one thing should know its place, but at the same time, it's the subcategories that come out of it where you get people claiming that they're fucking empaths. Which, I mean, by definition, that means like there's people out there who are not, which aren't just psychopaths. It's just they're just not empathetic, and it's like, what kind of bullshit is this? Like, and I think that's what he's probably getting at. It's the dimwits who take it on and then pervert it overall. I do also think, the commodification of it is sadly to its digression overall. Like, it can't really expand. But I also think it's just part of the human condition. Like, we can't be satisfied. It was probably Schopenhauer who said it, but I'm sure a number of other philosophers did. But it's like, even if we did wake up in a perfect world where every need was met, every time you thought you were hungry, a roasted chicken fell in your lap. Every time you were horny, the perfect woman just turned up. It's if any of us lived in that world, might have been Dostoevsky who said it, but yeah, if we actually did live in that kind of existence, it wouldn't take very long before you just end up doing something transgressive, essentially. Just, you'd go against it even when it is in your best interest, which is what human beings are very inclined to do, because I suppose maybe it comes down to a question of free will, but I think it's also, we're not satisfied with satisfaction, basically, or being, we're not content with contentment overall. And maybe that is a good thing. I don't know. I mean, you can't progress if you're in a state of enlightenment, let's say, because where is there to go? It seems to be an ironic and somewhat nonsensical, or at least paradoxical viewpoint, especially to talk about Franny and Zooey, especially the former. it's like you come to this intellectual crisis of like where to go, what avenue, where, what should I do, and then you end up turning to an idea of a god, essentially. And I do think that always comes back to ego, and it is also contradictory in a lot of ways, because it's almost like saying I am at this point where I don't know what the hell I'm doing, therefore I'm going to seek answers from something that cannot answer me back. So it almost seems like it doesn't really make sense if you think about it in a logical way, but in any kind of rational sense, it's basically saying I am without reason, therefore I will seek answers from that which cannot give me reason. See what I mean? I mean, it doesn't really work, does it? It's like, I mean, that's probably why religion's, still thriving to this day, because not sure whether any of you are still here. Quiet tonight. See, look, this is what Salinger's done to you. You say you don't like it, but you're caught in the thoughts. Anyway, I'll read an article because, well, to be truthful to the book and whatnot. When in Franny and all that. Let's have a look. Do I have it ready? Just get rid of this. I've had this for like nearly an hour. Actually, before I get to that, I mean, it's a good point. I mean, I know this is probably tasking for a lot of whatever small audience I have, but I actually the funny thing with this book is it does feel longer than it is. You could say, oh, it's a quick read, it'll only take you a few days. It feels like you've read a 400 or 500 page book after finishing this. I guess that's a compliment, but in some lights I could see that as a criticism. It shouldn't feel like that way, but maybe with all the ideas and concepts it's trying to explore, plus the rallying dialogue, things like that, I don't know. Overall, I say I enjoyed it probably more than I thought I was going to. At one point, I actually thought, this is very good. By the end, I think it's good, pretty good. But I feel a little bit unable to fully recommend it to any. I mean, if someone told me, like, have you read Salinger? Like, I'm going to be mentioning Catcher and Banana Fish before I mention this. Not to be too hierarchical about it all or anything like that, but to triage them, those would take precedence. And it's only if someone mentioned this one before I had the chance to say, oh yeah, and I've also read this kind of thing. I think overall that Salinger probably came from a pretty fucking well-off family, from what I can tell, which is, fine, but for some reason I didn't get that impression as much with Catcher. Yeah, exactly. It's good point. To get more onto that. So yeah, I mean, like this article, A Book for the Beach, Franny and Zooey by J.D. Salinger. A sojourn with Salinger's family of squabbling siblings may be exhausting, but it is never dull. Franny and Zooey is just 157 pages long. I write that not to advocate it as a quick read or even to suggest that it might be cheap, although both might be handy for the beach. I'm going to get back to this beach comment. I point it out because its length is wildly deceptive. For within what Salinger himself described as a pretty skimpy looking book, he manages to steamroll a sizable chunk of the human condition. Published in the New Yorker in 1955 and 57 as a short story and a novella, Franny and Zooey first appeared together in 61. I've already said this. The curtain rises on Franny as the eponymous fresh-faced American college girl Frances Glass arrives by train to meet her boyfriend, Lane, ahead of a big uni football match. But over lunch, Franny's skittish intellectual gaiety begins to crack, revealing a bitter abhorrence of phony experts, narcissistic ambition, and above all, ego. Holden Caulfield, anyone? Reeling from the vitriol, Lane notices a small book. Okay, this is just kind of repeating what I've said before, just in better language. Provokes an outpouring of enthusiasm for the virtuous tale of pilgrimage and prayer. It seems that the book has triggered her torment. Indeed, as the scene marches toward its frantic climax, Franny collapses under the mental strain. Zooey, the second act of the drama, is played out in the family apartment in New York, where Franny is taken to the couch in distress. The titular character is her brother, an agile young actor who chain-smokes cigars, punctuates every sentence with "God damn," and is constantly tormented by his 5 siblings who are, variously, dead, teaching, running a household, or living as a Carthusian monk. As Zooey battles with his mum's concerns over her ailing daughter and beards Franny about the true reason for her trauma, it's impossible not to get drawn into the verbal crossfire. I am in that living room, constantly on the verge of telling them both where to get off. Not that it would be of any use. All 7 of the Glass children are sharp-witted intellectuals whose perspicacity was honed by regular appearances on a popular radio show, It's a Wise Child. They're obsessed with learning and seem to have swallowed the entire philosophical canon of both East and West. I've read this family drama on countless occasions, yet its intense, feverish quality hooks me every time. Franny's bilious outpourings may be wildly out of proportion, but they are refreshingly premised on an intellectual wrangle rather than a romantic tangle, flimsy political intrigue or financial conundrum. And while the relentlessness of Zooey's row with Franny is undoubtedly exhausting, Salinger has created one of the few realistic family bust-ups in modern literature. But for me, it's Zooey's exasperated, endearing, intolerant relationship with his mother that makes this book a true gem. I actually agree with that. I mean, I've alluded to it earlier. I felt like the poignancy of it really came to life in those moments. Absurdly bath-bound, Zooey quarrelling with his world-weary mother through a shower curtain is an anecdote to all the trite, saccharine and consciously obnoxious relationships that abound in more crowd-pleasing literature. Perhaps then it is surprising that Franny and Zooey became an instant hit. But while the public took to the Glass progeny, these perplexing figures weren't universally beloved, and Salinger knew it. The Wise Child's readers, he noted, were split between those who held that the Glasses were a bunch of insufferably superior little bastards that should have been drowned or gassed at birth, and those who held that they were bona fide underage wits and savants of an uncommon, if unenviable, order. That Salinger found them irresistible irked the critics. Salinger loves the Glasses more than God loves them, wrote John Updike in the New York Times. And indeed, he returned to the Glass family again and again in a clutch of stories. The Catcher in the Rye may be Salinger's most famous book, but for me, Franny and Zooey is his masterpiece. Frenetic, exhausting, and uncompromising, this skimpy little book might piss you off rather than perk you up, but one thing's for sure, it won't leave you cold. Well, I'd have to disagree with you there, Nicola Davis, if you're still alive. Because it's a good addition to his, repertoire, but I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a subjective thing, but I felt like the exploration of themes and whatnot, especially of death in the family and coming to a crossroads, intellectual despair, crisis of identity kind of thing. I mean, it's not really identity; it's more coming of age with Catcher. I think it's better realised in that piece. Maybe that's just me. I don't know, but I don't think so. I actually think Banana Fish. You know, if I was to compare the short story of Franny to that, Banana Fish kicks it out of the water every time. And yeah, as I was going to say about that article, saying it's a take to the beach book, I thought that was a hint of like, oh, she's going to mention A Perfect Day for Banana Fish, a story that is, you know, utilizes a beach as one of its settings. But no, she doesn't mention it, which I find a bit weird. I don't know. Maybe it's one of those things, esoteric kind of jokes. I'm not sure, but yeah. No one's read. No one's read the book. Clearly, it's all right with me. I mean, I'll have an early one. It's all good. Did anyone else have any thoughts on it? Because I think I've exhausted my own critique or impressions. I mean, overall, I do think Salinger is well worth your time. Well worth your time. Like, he's very good at bringing people to life, and I would suspect that a lot of the dialogue and their, you know, little behaviours and whatnot, that's all from observation and experience. Like, he's taking these from real life. Well, I mean, that would be my guess. I could be wrong, but I feel like for me it seems obvious that certain little phrases are just plucked out of, you know, real life and put into his stories, and possibly the characters within are people that he knew or grew up with or whatever, which, I mean, they always are anyway, but for him, I think he knows who each one of them is. Oh, did you actually buy a copy? It's dedication. It's dedication. Probably, although I suppose with this one you probably got it for like a few quid on Amazon. Maybe. I know you can get your hands on a copy of this pretty easy, I would say. I mean, admittedly, actually, to I'll do a quick. I haven't actually set this up, I don't think. But yeah, to get a feel for the book. Where the fuck is it? There we go. Let me see how this appears. Probably crap. Oh no, wrong one. Let me get rid of that. Yeah, let me fucking move me. My fucking ugly ass. So yeah, digitized by Yuri Karas. So stolen by Yuri Karas and badly formatted, I've got to say. I mean, I share these on Patreon. You know, I'm not telling you to download them. If you want to join, I try to at least give out the ebook so people can have a chance of reading it. I don't recommend reading it on ebook most of the time, But, you know, free is free, motherfucker. So, but yeah, 6 out of 10 for the formatting. I mean, he opens the book with a paragraph break. Pfft, you don't do that. Come on. That's an amateur. That should have told me everything I needed to know. But yeah, there's other things as well. I mean, when I was reading the book, if you're, I don't know why I'm going to give this tip, but if you have someone giving a monologue, a long speech in a book, you can open them with a quotation mark. But if they're going to carry on talking in the next paragraph, you don't close it. So basically, you leave it open, and then you have another speech or quotation mark. So I called it left and right because it is like it's supposed to look, you know, like this. But you don't need to do that if that speaker is continuing, essentially. It's a little bit tricky to explain, and even when reading this, I was slightly confused because I thought I was getting it mixed up because I was like, is Zooey still talking here, or is someone interrupted? Mainly because the justification of the text was off. So it was either on the right or the left, and then someone was still speaking, and then I was like, okay, that was them. Yeah, basically, bit of a tricky thing, but you have to be cautious of that. It is a bit weird. I don't really know why. I think it's more that if you have a speech bubble open, for the reader to know that they're still speaking, you don't close it, because presumably the next time, if you don't close it, if another one appears, then you know as the reader that that person has continued speaking, not that somebody else has chimed in, if you see what I'm saying. And if it wasn't for the odd justification, and I mean justification in terms of like, has the text been justified, then maybe that was partly the reason. But yeah, there were other things like the odd where it should have had an exclamation mark, there was a number 1 and stuff like that. So I was a bit perplexed by some of the formatting of this, which is, you know, you get what you pay for, basically. You get what you pay for. But yeah, but I might finish it off with this, but so this is how it starts. Though brilliantly sunny, Saturday morning was overcoat weather again, not just topcoat weather, as it had been all week, and as everyone had hoped it would stay for the big weekend, the weekend of the Yale game. I mean, I've got to admire how fucking boring this is. I mean, you've got to have some balls to open up with talking about the weather and an upcoming college football game. Of the 20-some young men who were waiting at the station for their dates to arrive on the 10:52, no more than 6 or 7 were out on the cold, open platform. The rest were standing around in hatless, smoky little groups of 2s and 3s and 4s inside the heated waiting room, talking in voices that, almost without exception, sounded collegiately dogmatic, as though each young man, in his strident conversational turn, was clearing up, once and for all, some highly controversial issue, one that the outside, non-matriculating world had been bungling, provocatively or not, for centuries. I do quite like this as an opening, though, because this whole thing is alluding to what Franny's issue with the world is. It's quite sarcastic in ways. Lane Cotel, in a Burberry raincoat that apparently had a wool liner buttoned into it, was one of the 6 or 7 boys out on the open platform, or rather he was, and he wasn't one of them. I still think that sentence reads weird to me. For 10 minutes or more he had deliberately been standing just out of conversation range of the other boys, his back against the Free Christian Science literature rack, his ungloved hands in the coat pockets. He was wearing a maroon cashmere muffler which had hiked up to his neck, giving him next to no protection against the cold. Abruptly and rather absently, he took his right hand out of his coat pocket and started to adjust the muffler, but before it was adjusted, he changed his mind and used the same hand to reach inside his coat and take out a letter from the inside pocket of his jacket. He began to read it immediately with his mouth not quite closed. The letter was written, typewritten, on pale blue notepaper. It had a handled, unfresh look, as if it had been taken out of its envelope and read several times before. Tuesday, I think. Dearest Lane. And so that's where we get into the letter that Franny wrote to Lane. And I like that as a technique. I think it's quite good. You often see it in more modern things where like a character will be spoken about for quite a while, and in movies it's quite often that you only see them from the side or behind, like in shadows, and it kind of builds this. So in a sense you have a mythos surrounding the character before you've even met them. And in the letter she does come across as a bit of a ditzy, frantic, somewhat posh, maybe a know-it-all, but in a kind of endearing sense. She seems sweet, but at the same time she could be a head case, and I suppose in a way it turns out both. But yeah, it was a very good way of demonstrating what the character was going to be like. And funnily enough, maybe that was why not Notes from Underground came to mind with her character, but even in a way Crime and Punishment, because the amount of fucking letters that are in that book is an epistolary crime in my view, but in of itself. But you know, in this time letters were, you know, the emojis of our times, so you know they had a significance that in a way I don't think Zoomers can really understand. But yeah, when it comes to like the Americana type of novel, or the great American novel, I think these are good examples of it, or this Salinger is especially. There is something so American about the feel of it, the language, the kind of, even the sarcasm, even though I do think it's a byproduct of English colonialism perhaps, but yeah, there's definitely still a kind of true American tint to it. And yeah, I don't know, I enjoy it. I think I like the way he kind of plays with things, and as a narrator as well, he's a little bit playful in terms of like he almost personifies it at times. He kind of hints at it, but then he never really commits to it. And in a way, I suppose that whilst I don't think, you know, letter formats will die out completely, they will become surely more seldom seen. Mainly, I mean, it's funny, I mean, the things I'm working on now, they do incorporate emails from time to time. But even the way I'm using them, it's not exactly like we're getting a lot of information from them. It's more that I'm trying to demonstrate how people use such a myriad of different communications, and yet really they all boil down to a text format, whether, you know, minuscule or expanded on or whatever, but it's all on screen, it's not on paper, which, you know, that's why Painbow will read Kindle at some point, whether he likes to admit it or not. He'll be forced to, because all those obscure texts won't be printed at some point. Well, in the future he'll be trying to read some G.C. Mackay, and all he'll be able to find is some dirty ebook on some pervert. I would agree. I liked Franny, but maybe if we got to know her more, we would have just been like, oh, she's the female Holden Caulfield, which is like every guy's wet dream. So it's like, is this just my own fantasy? I'd love a fucking mentally ill girl. But no, she was interesting, and apparently she was damn fine, according to the novel as well. Although I was a little bit surprised to read that she had black hair. I don't know why. I just didn't see that. I suppose when it comes to like American 1950s-ism, I'm always expecting them to be blonde or mousy haired for some reason, and then when it was actually detailed that she was black haired, I was kind of like, oh, okay. Didn't anticipate that for some reason. You quash my expectations there, which a lot of the other part of the novel doesn't do, in fairness. I mean, it's not a plot driven piece. I mean, so for it to be criticized for its plot, I think is a bit of a superfluous criticism, actually, overall, because it's like, well, obviously it's not about the story that much. It's far more about the exploration of ideas through dialogue, through characterization and whatnot. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'd be flabbergasted if this wasn't actually adapted for the stage, or hadn't been, because it's literally ripe and ready to go. You just center the text, and you've got you've got your play script. Basically, you can work around the prose, because it's pretty far and few between anyway, and you can kind of convert that into stage directions in some ways. Don't know, maybe it'll happen at some point. I used to love it. Can't read bright screens anymore though. Just not the same. You are aware that you can turn down the intensity of the light, right? You can dim it, darling. Or you could even put it in dark mode. And that's the answer to your problem. I mean, my criticism is that I actually don't feel like I take in the book as well when I'm not reading it on paper. I have no way of confirming the veracity of this claim, but I don't know, maybe I do. Alright, my theory would be maybe the same reason a bunch of millions of idiots still pay for Netflix when you can clearly get anything you want for free online. But I think the reason millions of idiots still pay for Netflix is mainly to feel some sort of communal societal sense. It's like if you're watching Breaking Bad on Netflix, it's quite a good chance that someone else out there is reading it. Oh, fucking hell. Getting to my point before I've got to it. Yeah, someone else out there is watching it, whether they're in Portugal or fucking Mexico or wherever. But, and maybe it's the same with print books, because, or more that when I'm reading a print book, I have a sense that, this came about because a bunch of people actually, sat down in a room somewhere, and wherever it may have been, and they decided on how it was going to look like. Someone worked on the cover, someone edited the actual writing, obviously the author actually penned the book, and they would, all of these little things, and having that book then in my hands, knowing it's lived a life already, in a sense, or it's been born out of a kind of idea and whatnot. Whereas when you're reading something digital, it's like you don't know whether someone just copied and pasted that shit and just threw it on. I mean, maybe that is, you could argue it's the same thing in some ways, but there was a lot more care put into it when it comes to actually, or there should have been a lot more care put into it when it's something that's actually in print. So therefore I feel more of a responsibility, maybe, I don't know, to take it in. And I want to take it in more because I kind of know that it wouldn't have happened, in a sense, if other people didn't bring it to life. Whereas when something's digital, it's like any old arsehole can just. I mean, I'm not knocking people who actually do put it online or anything, but it's still dead essentially, and I think that might be my very over-explained issue with Kindle books. Know what I'm saying? Because it's just ones and zeros. It's the same as like doing it, and there's a frivolous attitude people have due to the nature of social media, where it's like, the post today, gone tomorrow kind of thing. Like stories are just chuck away bullshit. Like it's all nothing. Whereas a book is an organic thing. And to take it further, the book can only be in existence because of fucking trees. And the process of actually creating paper, for instance, and ink and all that kind of stuff. So the screen is the issue more than the brightness. Okay, anyone watching who's interested in Salinger, you may now exit. Because I'm probably not. I might mention a bit more, but I don't know. I would say read Banana Fish after reading this. I mean, I don't know really if it would enhance your experience, but I do think it's odd to me that you wouldn't have this included in this. I mean, can you call it a novel? I guess you can, but maybe even more interestingly, maybe if you have Franny. Then you have Zooey, and then maybe as a kind of I'm forgetting the word. The fuck is the word? I can't remember what it is, but it's basically before everything happened. Then you get that story of how all of this came together. Maybe that's what should happen. There's a movie term for it and I'm forgetting what it is, but in a future reference, whenever the book cover disappears, it's the end of the book review basically. But it was good. I enjoyed it. And I'm guessing we'll have to decide. Well, I think I'm going to have to decide because no one wants to join my Patreon. And I'm assuming no one wants to spin the wheel. So Painbow, you can get a little discount tonight. £2.50 a spin. How's that sound? It's for you only. For one night only as well. I don't know why you have to sexualize every sentence you exclaim, but I like it. No, you're right. The Kindles suck in general. I mean, it also makes it too. It just makes it more. It's kind of like the phone. Like when I mean, I don't mind reading on it. It's all right, but it makes it too private, doesn't it? It's like if you really wanted to read something very embarrassing in public, you've got to wear that if you're reading the print book. So if you're going out there reading Colleen Hoover or a bit of Twilight, you've got to wear that, you know, almost like a fucking label on your t-shirt. But if you're reading it on a Kindle, no one knows. So it just gives people an excuse to read shit, which is my major issue with this. This should have been discussed before they put this out there, because it's like, this is just going to encourage people to read cringe teen erotic fan fiction of fucking Jane Austen novels. And they're never going to actually read real books. Oh, Melissa. Melissa has bought you a spin. Painbow. How about that? Someone loves you. How's it feel? Well, you're getting a spin. I mean, if you join the Patreon, I'll be happy to take the next book as that one. I actually wouldn't mind that one either. I who have never known men. I've got to hand it to the author there. That is a title. That is a title. I who have never known men. But here's your spin, courtesy of Melissa. You just erect this motherfucker. It's not the first time I've said that. There we go. There we go. Looking good. Let's spin that wheel, baby. Here's hoping it will land exactly where it is right now. Oh, fucking hell. You've won, you can be Richard La Ruina, is that his name? You get to play a whole round of Super Seducer, which in my head at the time of putting it on there, I thought I'd do it, you know, right now. But I feel like you can do this whenever you want. Maybe save it till Christmas. So, because I think, yeah, that's what I'm advising you to do that. Obviously, we could do it whenever, but you will be able to choose every answer and even the round that you want. Congratulations. Or, if I mean, you still haven't joined the Patreon, so. Or you can just pick the next book and we'll quietly move along. It's a fucking good prize. It's probably, you know, a game he should be playing instead of staring at bright Kindle screens. So yeah, well, let me know when you want to have a go at it. I would, could be now, but I can't be bothered. Oh, Painbow. I take it that's for one spin. Yeah. Very kind. Oh, it's a spin for Melissa. Aren't you a couple of fucking... Why don't you just suck each other's fucking arseholes already? Come on. I mean, I don't know why you two are the only people speaking here. I mean, it's a bit weird, to be honest. I mean, the rest of you, the exception of one, bit weird, if I'm honest. You're just lurking in the corner. I mean, imagine if they were at a party, they're just there. Just listening to three people chatting. This is fun. I'm just gonna sit here. I get that people have anxiety, but stop being a pussy, basically, would be my advice. It's like, there's no judgment going on here. Well, according to my thing, there's 7 more of us, or at least 8 more of you. People fucking Patrick's bitching because I asked him for an ebook instead of a shitty PDF, and he's sulking in the corner, and he still hasn't sent me any wine. He's been dangling that carrot for years. Did you read the book? I think this is the true shame. He didn't read it and he's trying to hide away. Okay, so for Melissa. I mean, if you want, you can give your winnings to Melissa anyway. If you know. If you don't want to be the seducer, I don't judge. Does anyone notice how you've... Okay. This fucking wheel. Hawk was right. This is bent. Maybe he hacked it. How the fuck can it... The chances of that happening are just like astronomically... Well, not astronomically, but pretty slim. Twice in a row. Okay, so you're both going to be seducers. We'll have to arrange a fucking stream. Another... I know everybody's favourite streams were the super seducer ones, so... I'd save it for Christmas. Yeah? You didn't read it. Patrick, I think you're failing to see the point of a book club. There is an arrangement between a small group of people that within a week's time we are each going to read a certain book. I think people who fail to read the book should have to pay a fine to me. Because, I mean, how am I supposed to... You know. It's fine. Maybe I've convinced you not to read it. I don't know. But yeah, anyone out there, they should be reading some Salinger in their life at some point. Well, congratulations on the seducer winnings. I don't know when. You need to let me know when you want to cash that in, by the way, because I will forget. So yeah, remind me. I mean, who knows what's going to be going on around Christmas? But maybe we'll have a bit of maybe a Cope and Seethe Christmas special or something. It hasn't quite died. I know. I had a weird week with this thing because I felt like the book club was like, oh shit, I'm getting more subs for this. Oh, this is all right. And then the last like few days, it's just dropped again. So I'm like, oh, maybe that's because they watched Cope and Seeth. I don't know, but it means I can bring it back and not worry. I mean, I think this is grounds for punishment, I would say. Like, you got to commit to the club. It ain't no fucking willy-nilly, oh, I'll do it if I want to kind of thing. You're either in or you're out. You got to commit, motherfucker. This isn't some loosey-goosey pump and dump one night stand where you just come and go as you please, or not and go as you please. You gotta commit, motherfucker. That's an idea. That's an idea. Problem is, with the internet, they could probably just Google it, but I could be very specific. Anyway, yeah, well, we'll read I Who Have Not Known Men. I'm up for that. So, let me find it. Or is it Never Known Men? Okay. Never Known. Okay. Jacqueline Hartman. What does this say about it? Let's have a look at this shit. A young woman is kept in a cage underground with 39 other females. Good start. Guarded by armed men who never speak, her crimes unremembered, if indeed they were crimes. The youngest of 40, a child with no name and no past, she survives for some purpose long forgotten in a world ravaged and wasted. In this reality where intimacy is forbidden, Orwellian vibes, in the unrelenting sameness of the artificial days and nights, she knows nothing of books and time, of needs and feelings. Okay. Getting a bit Brave New World. Then everything changes and nothing changes. A young woman who has never known men, a child who knows of no history before the bars and restraints, must now reinvent herself piece by piece in a place she has never been, and in the face of the most challenging and terrifying of unknowns, freedom. Okay. This will either be shit or it will be decent-ish. Jacqueline Hartman was born in Etterbeek, Belgium. 1929, being half Jewish, the family moved to Casablanca when the Nazis invaded. Yada yada yada. She qualified as a psychoanalyst. Red flag. She had given up writing after her fourth book. Resumed her. She came back to writing 20 years later. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I'll resist reading Goodreads bullshit surrounding it. I don't know why Patrick's keeps going on about this South Korean woman. All because she's won the Nobel Prize. I don't really get it. From what I read of the article you sent me, the only reason she won that is because she's patriarchy. Yawn. and most of the things about the trials and tribulations that women face in today's world. I mean, it's like you lot learn nothing. I mean, I don't waffle on about this shit for no reason. It's all an agenda. Come on. We don't need to pay attention to like, oh, this won this prize. Who cares? Oh, won the Man Booker. Fucking that Eileen shit was nominated for some award of a similar ilk, and that novel sucked. Let's be honest. I mean, out of all of the novels, I mean, we haven't done many so far, in fairness, but I think that's bottom for me. I mean, what else is it? I can't remember what else we've done. But even that self-published one of Pen Pal, I would still think, entertainment-wise, clearly better than Eileen. Prose, maybe on par, but it's at least Pen Pal set kind of an atmosphere and whatnot, whereas Eileen, it did a bit. I mean, maybe the world building was slightly better in Eileen, but in terms of actual like just intrigue in what was happening, yeah, I think for me, Eileen, actually maybe that would be an interesting thing to do, actually rank the books thus far. Maybe when we get to 10 we'll do a little bit of a, yeah, to really like get an idea. We could do our own, we'd call it the GC McKay is God Award, where at the end of it you all buy my book. I mean, to be honest, I'm actually disgusted that no one said let's read some GC McKay. It's got to be on the book club at some point. I mean, I already know that I'm above these books. That's true. I mean, that's probably why you haven't mentioned it. But no, in all seriousness, it might be interesting to do that at some point. So if we get to 10, we've only got 2 more to go. And just out of intrigue, we could yeah, make note of the top 3. I think I already know what would top mine. I mean, it's Stoner, but obviously it's almost demonstrative of how superfluous and immaterial this type of reward system is, because a lot of the novels have been pretty different in many ways. I mean, to have Cows and Stoner and Franny and Zooey, fucking Annihilation, like they're all in this category of like which one's the best. It's a stupid question, really, but it would be interesting to sure, I look forward to it. If she can win it, no, she's won it because she's a South Korean female author. Wake up, son. I'm a white man in England. It's not going to happen. Have you not seen the amount of articles and shit that are out there, like saying if you're a white dude trying to get into the fucking writing world these days, it ain't going to happen, son, unless I come out trans or something. It's, I mean, and I'm being obviously somewhat facetious, but there is an element of truth to it. Like the beings that govern this at the moment, in terms of the publishing world at least, it has a certain criteria that it's trying to meet, and it inviting assholes like me to the party, basically. It doesn't matter what I write. And I don't know whether, you know, maybe we'd read this particular author's stuff and it's great. I don't know. But I would doubt it, to be honest. It's true, but I am hopeful. We will read. I mean, we'll probably just end up reading Mary Shelley or something. I mean, not being funny as well. I mean, how long is that guy going to, you know, getting on, right? I mean, it's 2024. He was already pretty famous. How old is he now? Gotta be getting on. I'm not sure. I mean, as much as an interview would be good, I'm not sure how much he'd be aware of what's happening. Halloween. We will read some King at some point, I'm sure. I was going to suggest some Bukowski soon, but yeah, I'm intrigued to read this one. We are giving another woman a go here, so you can't accuse the club of being misogynistic. It's quite well reviewed. You know, it's still got 4.22 on Goodreads, 95,000 ratings. That's actually pretty impressive. Which might be a red flag, I don't know, but so yeah, that'll be with the book. Oh wait, I normally do this shit. Okay. Okay, let me find a. There's quite a few covers of this. Most of them are shite. This one's alright. Quite like this. That one's alright. I've got a feeling maybe we can take some like predictions as well for the next book, because there's part of me thinking this is going to be shit. Let me find seems like there's a lot of young females who've reviewed this, which is fine. You know, I'm not trying to insinuate anything here. maybe I am. I'm a duplicitous motherfucker when I want to be. Okay, that'll do. Okay, here we go. So yeah, this is going to be the next book. Hopefully I can find this on ebook. This is next week's read. You're going to read it, right? Right? I didn't ever expect you to become woke. Woke-bo. As long as the choices are diverse, it's more interesting. Clearly, your wife has been getting up your ass into your brain. Are you wearing an apron at the moment? I'd be very intrigued. Oh, Patrick's fucking gone off on one. And he's making claims. Oh no, he's going to skip King. You can't skip King. No. Oh, he's copy and pasting from fucking Amazon. He's on a mad sci-fi. He watched Blade Runner 2049 and he's gone insane. He's been wanking over Hunter Schafer in anticipation. It's all good. You don't need to explain yourself. I was just ribbing at you. Patrick, if you want to suggest a book, I mean, how many fucking times do I need to tell you, son? It's in the bottom corner here. Once I get my wine, you've got a book that you can choose. Diversity has infected global thinking. It will only stop when America is majority black and people start queuing for bread. Might be the greatest comment you've ever made. There was a lot in that comment. I enjoyed it. Kind of subtle racism, criticism of history. Also, a kind of a brutal satire of human history itself. It was good. I like that. Maybe some truth in it as well. They say it's better than 1984. Okay, Patrick's coming out with one as well. They. When you're talking about 1984. Truth speak. It's they that say it's better. Brilliant. Anyway, I'm probably just elongating this in hope of getting donations that are never going to come. So I'm going to close it. I haven't been chatting about the book for about 45 minutes. So yeah, it's been fun. Join the Patreon. Because also on my own front, yeah, the website's getting there. I'm fucking exhausted actually. I'm putting together too much, but yeah, once the website's out, you'll know what I'm talking about a bit more. Never mind if you don't like ebooks. Once you see the covers of these ebooks, you're gonna want them. And if failing that, you'll be able to get a nice print copy with a few little extras. So yeah, that's coming soon. And yeah, there'll be more on the agenda. It's just getting it together for now. And yeah, well, what else can I say, really? The book will come out when it's ready, motherfucker. I don't know, to be honest. I think it's about halfway there, give or take. Might be more. I don't know. It's hard. To be honest, I might say goodbye to short stories after this. They're a different beast. Like I kind of realize if you want to write novels or long stories, like trying to mix it up with short stories, it's fine, but I find that the mediums are very separate. I don't know. Maybe I'm talking out of my arse, but yeah. Short stories are great. I've a lot of respect for them, and I actually think in some ways they are harder to pull off, because with a novel you got more room to, well, filler. But short stories kind of have their own rules a lot of the time. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like the collection is coming along. I like how it looks. I like how it feels. It's fucking weird. I don't really know what I'd make of it theme wise, if I'm honest. But I see progress to a certain extent. So yeah, I'll obviously keep you abreast. I haven't watched a movie since last Sunday, actually, you cheeky cunts. Says the cunt who can't read a fucking 150-page book in a week. I mean, come on. There's taking the piss, and then there's fucking talk about rich. Jesus. Oh. Anyway, yeah, I'm off. That'll do for tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Been fun. And well, I'll see you for next week, when we'll probably have even fewer viewers than we had tonight, with the obscure I Who Have Never Known Men. Or maybe we'll get some surprise visitors for this one. I don't know. That would be nice. Anyway, until then, it's been fun. Have a good weekend, or the remainder of it. And yeah, try not to die in the coming week, I guess. Until then, it's not interested in Salinger. Okay. Goddamn. What do you say to that shit? Anyway. Maybe stick to a channel and you'll retain viewers. I've got 2 channels. But yeah. Well, I'll be reading it. If it's only me and you, then so be it. See you next week.